Faded Zodiac is a sculptural body of work that I'm currently working on. The process that I'm using is actually something I've never really worked with before. I have worked with metal wire, just mostly to build like armatures for clay sculpting, but I've never actually just used metal wire as the finished material for a sculpture. It's an idea that I had had for a while now, and I'm just now getting the opportunity because now I have some equipment and some space, because this type of sculpting really requires that. Usually the type of sculpting I've done in the past is on a much smaller scale. So this body of work is very important to me because it represents a transition period in my life. So the name Faded Zodiac is meant to show the fading of my life living abroad, because I lived in China for almost 2 decades, for about 18 years. While I was in China, of course, I spent most of my adult life there, so I had most of my adult experiences there. Having to go through loss and but also marriage, and then becoming a father. So these are all things that I experienced while living in another country, right? Me and my family have moved back to the United States. This is a body of work that represents that transition, right? The Chinese zodiac is something that has inspired me in my own work, and it's something that has a motif that has reoccurred in a lot of my work, right? I do have that connection with the Chinese culture, so I wanted to build and create sculptures that represent these 12 animals of the Chinese zodiac. I've gone through a lot of changes in the past year, so so this body of work is I want it to be a representation of my experiences going through these transitions. Some of the visual characteristics of this body of work. So I am using steel wire, and wire is the predominant material that I use for these sculptures. I'm using a range of gauges for the wire, starting with a thicker gauge, like a 9 gauge wire, to build the armature of the sculptures. The reason that I'm using wire to sculpt this body of work is the material is very versatile. Like the way that I'm using it, I can weld the wire very tightly to bring out intricate details, and then I can also weld the wire in a way where it's very loose, which the combination of those two characteristics helps the sculpture appear to fade, which is where the name of the body of work comes from. And there again, that shows the representation of my old life fading and my new life coming into existence, just like the sculptures are fading and coming into existence. Doing that also allows the sculptures to create a lot of visual movement. That, and the combination of the gestures that I'm using with each animal. So for example, the horse is up on his hind legs rearing back, so that is a gesture that requires a lot of movement. You think of a horse and it's moving, it rears up. It's in motion, it's in the action of that gesture. This is something that I want to pull into all the sculptures, so it's something that will run consistent with the whole body of work. Will be the way that the wire is tightly welded to show the details, and then a gradation of it being loosely welded to show this idea of the animal fading. Something that I like to do with my art is experiment. Uh, when I lived in China, I was an art teacher at an international high school for, it was about 16 years. Something that I always pulled into my own art classes was the idea of experimentation. I always pushed my students to experiment, mix media, synthesize, and that's exactly what I do in my own artwork. A lot of my work is based around my own life experiences. Things that I go through. It could be day to day, or it could be something very large or very life changing, like losing a loved one. While I was living in China, I lost both my dad and my brother. My brother lived in China as well. But yeah, it's my own life experiences that really push my artwork and push my creativity. And like I said, no matter how tragic it is or happy the experience is, this is what really pushes my own ideas for my work.